Dr. Dr. King brings it home with this speech to the Southern Christian Leadership Council in Atlanta in 1963. He said, "Now we've got to get this thing right. What is needed is a realization that power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demand of justice, and justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love. And this is what we must see as we move on," he said. My friends, we have certainly seen a lot of power exercised lately without love, and it is indeed abusive and reckless. It is murderous and cruel. Recently, I've been increasingly immersed in immigration struggles, and I know that exercising power out of love is just what is needed. Love of neighbor. We don't often quote the Bible or Jesus as Unitarian Universalists, but I sure wish the white Christian nationalists who are violently trying to make us a white nation would quote Jesus a little more often. In Matthew 22, when Jesus was asked what the greatest of the 10 Commandments was, he said, "The greatest commandments are love God and love your neighbor." Love your neighbor. Now we're getting somewhere. So much of the kind of love we're talking about is how we treat one another, how we approach life and the problems that surround us, how we ensure people are safe and can flourish, and how we treat the person right in front of us. Some of us would even say, like the Universalists of old did, that God is love. We UUs like to say we side with love. Our Unitarian Universalist Association started a sub-organization called Side with Love in the 1990s. One of the strengths of this movement is the idea of love, centering love, leading with love, living up to love's call for goodness and mercy in our world. Every year, Side with Love organizes 30 Days of Love, beginning with Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday and ending with Valentine's Day. Well, that's kind of nice, but I think Valentine's Day does not have that same meaning as Dr. King's birthday. Maybe it's just me. Ending on Valentine's Day does feel a little anemic, not to diss our UUA, but it is a good effort. I do turn to Side with Love for movement, organizing efforts, and inspiration to use during this time of year, this month of love, this Black History Month, and for this year in particular, for this political moment we are in. There's another recognition that some people have honored around this time of year, and it is the season for nonviolence. It begins on January 30th, the anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi's assassination, and it ends on April 4th, the date of King's assassination. It's 64 days. During this season, we're invited to spend time thinking about nonviolence as a practice in our lives. It certainly gets closer to what love can be or should be. When we approach our lives, when we encounter people of all sorts with love taking the lead, we are much more likely to be nonviolent. When we approach people with suspicion and fear, we are more likely to act that way, with violence in our words and deeds. The season for nonviolence is an expression of love, compassion, and justice, reflected from the lives of these two prophetic men. Gandhi and King were not satisfied with the status quo. For Gandhi, it was British imperialism and the caste system in India. In that system, wealth and opportunity were unevenly distributed, and some people were worth more than others. He was a lawyer and lived for a while in South Africa. He was a pluralist and opposed the division of India into Hindu and Muslim. He was in and out of prison and negotiated for the release of political prisoners. Gandhi was assassinated by a Hindu nationalist, on January 30th, 1948. King heard about the nonviolent movement that Gandhi had led and learned from civil rights leaders like James Lawson, who went to India to learn this movement. King was also angered by the disparities of wealth in the U.S., the cruelty of whites toward blacks, and the restricted rights around racial lines. King was not well loved back then, and he was assassinated in Memphis while trying to organize trash haulers speaking out for the Poor People's Campaign. It was April 4th, 1968, when he was killed by a white Southerner. And so the season for nonviolence spans those two memorial dates, 64 days, and while I'd like to see love honored 365 days a year or 525,600 minutes, I think the emphasis on these two nonviolent people giving their lives for love of neighbor is a way to bring love into focus for 64 days. If you go to their website, which is gandhiinstitute.org, you'll find a daily affirmation you can use during the 64 days for nonviolence. On their website for today, February 8th, day 9, so you got a lot of time left, the focus is on dreaming. The website reads, Martin Luther King Jr. had a dream, and it asks you, what is your own dream for peace? What is one thing you can do to honor your dream? Do it today. And then there's a quote, every great dream begins with a dreamer. Always remember you have within you the strength, the patience, and the passion to reach for the stars to change the world. That's Harriet Tubman. And then there's a reflection question, and after the service I encourage you to go ahead and ask it to yourselves. It is said that a goal is a dream with a deadline attached. Do you agree? Describe your vision for a world that is truly just and peaceful. What is one thing you can do every day to honor your dream? Sometimes we get lost or confused about how to express the kind of love I'm talking about today, the love and recognition of the dignity and wholeness of every person. Leo Tolstoy wrote an inspiring story called The Three Questions that begins to get at it for me. The story goes like this. A king decides he needs to know the answers to these three questions. What is the right time? Who are the right people? And what is the most important thing to do? I don't know if you've ever wrestled with those questions. So the king does what kings will do, and he goes up the mountain to find the wise hermit, and the hermit is digging in his garden and is pretty tired. The king asks his questions, and the hermit says, I'm a little tired. The king takes the hermit's shovel and begins digging for the hermit. Pretty soon they both have to stop because a bearded man comes running out of the forest and he's bleeding from the abdomen. The king bandages the wound and helps the man heal. Pretty soon the bearded man confesses that he was an enemy of that king because the king had executed the man's brother and taken his property. He was following the king, and he had vowed to avenge his brother's death, but the king's bodyguards stopped him and wounded him. But it was the king who bandaged and saved him. The bearded man asked for forgiveness of the king, which the king freely gave. The king also returned the property and sent his personal physician to continue to care for the man. They had just made some kind of restorative justice or peace. The king was still not satisfied, though. He had still need answers to the three questions. Do you not see, replied the hermit, if you had not pitied my weakness yesterday, and had not dug these beds for me, but had gone on your way, that man would have attacked you, and you would have repented of not staying with me. So the most important time was when you were digging the beds, and I was the most important man, and to do me good was your most important business. Afterward, when that man ran to us, the most important time was when you were attending to him. For if you had not bound up his wounds, he would have died without having made peace with you. So he was the most important man, and what you did for him was your most important business. Remember then, there is only one time that is important, now. It is the most important time because it is the only time we have any power. The most necessary person is the one with whom you are, for no man knows whether he will ever have dealings with anyone else. And the most important affair is to do that person good, because for that purpose alone was man sent into life. Pardon the binary language of the time. My friends, the time is now. That's when we have our power, and our purpose is to do good for our neighbors. How we treat one another with love truly matters. Right now, the time is every day. Opening our hearts to the person in front of us is one of the ways we act on love. How can we soften our hearts in the face of the burly skinhead? I don't know. But I often speak before people who have been in prison for murder. I stand with them face to face, meditate with them, register them to vote, and they are pretty great. They talk about their spiritual journeys, how they were raised, who their role models are, and the more we talk, the more I realize our shared humanity. These are short classes I teach in the Office of Reentry down here in Dayton. And there are some folks, I have to admit, who sleep through my class. I try not to take it personally. I also know if they're living in a halfway house, it's noisy and uncomfortable. The people I worry about most are the people who are completely closed down, angry, and afraid. The best I can do is respect them, their wholeness, love them, and express to them the hope that they can find their path. And then there is showing love to people that are being harmed by systems around them. That's in front of us too. Love can take so many forms, and nonviolence is one way to express it. The nonviolent protests going on all around the nation, most notably in Minneapolis, are intended to stop the violence by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, and Customs and Border Patrol, CBP, and all the others enlisted into this military-like force in our streets. And again, people have been murdered for showing their love in action. It is a horror right now. I know we are all affected by what we see around us. I understand the need to unplug from time to time, but we really must not turn away completely from what's happening. I was happy to see Michigan Attorney General speak out. It was reported in the Michigan Advance on February 4th. Thank you, Audrey, for sharing that with me. Attorney General Dana Nessel's office launched a tracking form where people can begin to report federal immigration actions throughout Michigan. Data matters. The roundtable included law enforcement officials, immigrant rights advocates, and faith leaders from around the state. Other positive news came from the Marshall Project. They reported a federal judge has ordered the Internal Revenue Service to stop sharing taxpayers' addresses with federal immigration officials pending the resolution of a lawsuit challenging the practice in Massachusetts. A federal judge in Oregon blocked immigration agents from arresting people without warrants unless they believe their target is likely to escape. Kind of a big loophole there. But it's progress. Virginia Governor Abigail Spanberger ordered the end of the state's cooperation agreement with federal immigration officials, but county and local agreements do remain in place for now. It's all shifting and tentative, but it is progress. Here in Ohio, where I live, we are worried about ice descending on Springfield. It's about a half hour away from me. This town of only 60,000 people has about 15,000 Haitians living there legally under our country's temporary protective status laws. TPS. TPS was supposed to end in September. It was extended through February 3rd. Thankfully, after a lot of pressure from the public, the court is extending it again for another hearing. The removal of a quarter of the residents will disrupt this small city and send it reeling into economic despair. The Haitians work in textiles, meatpacking, education, and the law. Removal would cause massive family separation. Nationwide, 100,000 children could be ripped from families, and Haiti is not prepared for their safe return. To prepare for this potential ICE action, over 1,200 people showed up at a church in Springfield on Monday. The place was packed, standing room only. The fire marshal came in and said we were over capacity for the whole building. People were asked to leave, and many did. The speakers continued. They were interrupted again by the fire marshal, who said another 150 people had to leave or the program could not go on. The bishop from Faith in Action would not be able to get into the building unless people left. Many more left. And then a third time, the fire marshal said 30 more people had to go. Everyone was cooperative and kind, and the program went on. And fortunately, it was live streamed for those who left. The bishop was amazing, by the way. One of the most poignant moments of this gathering was when a Latino minister was speaking. He was following the speech of a Haitian activist. He told the story of the Samaritan woman at the well. Jesus, who was a wandering immigrant himself, asked the woman for water. Well, this was unheard of for a foreigner to ask for water, and for a man to ask it of a woman. Jews and Samaritans weren't exactly on good terms back then. They happen to have one of the longest dialogues in the Bible in John 4. The woman leaves her jar for his water and tells her village about Jesus. Well, in this Springfield gathering, the Latino minister briefly told that story. Then he picked up a glass of water and he gave it to the Haitian to drink. "My neighbor, you are welcome here," he said. And they had a long hug. It was a beautiful example of the power of love for the person in front of you. It was a beautiful example of the power of love across difference. It was a beautiful example of love of your neighbor. It was a beautiful example of love when systems are unjust. The next night, 6,000 people were on a Zoom call to support the Haitians in Springfield. Red, Wine, and Blue raised $100,000 for the Haitian Center in Springfield, for St. Vincent de Paul, and for Advocates for Basic Legal Authority. Impressive. What a beautiful example of the power and love in action for equity and justice. I have been moved by the bravery that love brings out. When we see people being treated with cruelty, we respond by loving them. They are worthy of being treated humanely under our legal system and as people residing in this nation. Cornel West said, "Justice is what love looks like in public." These mobs of violent ICE and CBP agents are hiding behind their big numbers, their tactical gear, and their wrong-headed sense of what America should look like. They operate out of a sense of scarcity and fear that brings out the worst in them. They wrongly blame immigration for the problems of white poverty. I am so grateful to see things changing. The administration pushes on with seemingly unchecked power, but the Haitian protection was extended. ICE is beginning a too slow drawdown from Minneapolis. People are joining together all over the country on rapid response groups like Signal, not owned or infiltrated by tech bro billionaires. People are delivering food, transporting people, watching out for kids, blowing whistles, and putting themselves in the line of fire bravely. My dear colleague from Marquette, Rose Rydell, went to Minneapolis a couple of weeks ago to be in solidarity there. The Reverend Dr. Sophia Betancourt, our UUA president, wrote in that new UUA pocket guide, The power that holds us together is love. Not an emotional love motivated by affection, but the spiritual discipline of love rooted in the non-negotiable sacredness of each and every person, and indeed of all life. Unitarian Universalist congregations and communities create the opportunity for people with vastly different answers to life's greatest questions to be in real, deep relationship with each other, communally caring for one another, and building solidarity across lines of profound difference. She wrote, "In this way, we practice building a world where difference does not divide us, where people of different backgrounds, religions, nations, and identities live free from violence, hatred, and dehumanization. Let us live our faith and our values. Let us live with love at the center 365 days a year. Love your neighbor with courage, my friends. Love your neighbor. The people are the last check on cruelty and over abusive power. Speak your values with courage. You and me, us together. May it be so."